Who has been trained for a certain job and you're doing that job right now? How many people went to school for a certain job and you're doing that job right now? Wow, so like 10%. 10% of people. And what would, people go to school for all sorts of things. I would argue that people are more effective and they are more efficient doing things that they were trained for, right? And here we have 10% of people here in this audience who are actually doing the things they were trained for. So we're going to go like this. This is me. This is, I was trained as an engineer. I lasted 18 months as an engineer. And there's a good old friend sitting at the back here who is joining that first company right about the same time as I stopped doing engineering work that I trained 5 years to do. So, through that time, I went through a number of jobs. Every time my job changed, I got a new title, sometimes a new team, sometimes a new desk, sometimes a new salary. Okay? But then I went to the second stint at Sera4. I started as employee number 3 there, signed on as the CEO, and I said, this is interesting, let's go for this. But through that time, my job has been the same title, the same desk, the same team, but my job has changed so much, so many times, and nobody announced it. Especially not me, because I didn't even know it was happening until after it happened. And those who've been through it would know what I mean. I think it's really important also to note that I was employee number 3. I am not the founder of Sera4. And this comes from somebody who was the founder recognizing, hey, there are jobs that are good for me, and I want to hire out the jobs that I don't necessarily want to do. So that's good context for the rest of what's coming up here. All right. So what I was going to show you, and I think many of you can imagine, is that the life in a startup and the life in a scaling company couldn't be more different. If I think about it, what my experience is with 5 people sitting around a picnic table, debating ideas, it's creativity, it's fluidity, it's everybody thinking about, how to fail fast, how to learn, and how to adapt, and how to get to product market fit. However, in a scaling company, I find it's about, hey, don't fail. There we go. Don't fail. Have KPIs, have accountability, and we'll get there. Just bear with us. Okay. So structure, teams, and roles. And all of a sudden, this structure looks and feels very, very different than it did at the start. And how do we maintain a lot of the startup attributes and the feeling and the dynamism when we're trying to build structure? And especially here in Canada, one of the short diversions I'll take is in this question, we fail fast, and then we don't fail. And just speaking personally as the CEO of a startup, capital forgiveness is not something that Canada does well, and it's in our culture. And so what happens from a CEO point of view and from a startup scaling point of view is that we stop taking the risks that we should, because I know if I go out and take risks and it doesn't work, that follows me around. So this is a cultural aspect. It's going to echo in the rest of the talk, but it's something I think that we could do better to support these companies to be wildly successful big organizations, because it does take risk. But our ecosystem doesn't allow as much risk as we might want it to be. So there we go. During this transition stage in the middle, it's actually harder in the transition. I know how to do, I figured out how to do the startup stage. And I was trained, and I've done professionally the at-scale stage, the running a big company. But the land in the middle is really, really difficult. We all know there's too much work, and everybody's job changes weekly or monthly, and nobody quite knows what's going on, and everybody feels uncomfortable about it. So how do we transition through that? Like, who would do this? I mean, who has the talent to do all of this? Who has the energy? And who has the right leaders or guidance or board or advisors to do all of this? Well, this is where we get to what I'm calling the founder hero myth. So who can name everybody's picture up here? I know that you're not, I believe you, but I think most of you can name everybody here, right? And probably a dozen more, but maybe not more than a dozen people who have started a company and then taken it all the way through all the stages. But everybody from investors to society says it's not okay to fail. You have to keep going. You have to take it through all of these different stages that look very, very different from when you start a company to when you go into transition and to when you hit scale. And so we're relying on people wanting to be like this because, let's face it, founders want to be these people, investors want to invest in these people, and people talk about these people. But I would argue that trying to emulate these people, although it's wonderful when it happens, we're probably losing 99 out of 100 of our startup companies in that journey somewhere along the way because we make it not okay to switch out. We don't even have an ecosystem to support having these companies live a life beyond their founders. So this was a quote from a gentleman named Frank Slootman, and if there's a book, if you're in the startup world, this book, Amp It Up, I could not recommend more. It's a very easy book to read. Somebody recommended it to me, and I thought, oh, I don't need this, and I got into it, and it was just mesmerizing. For those who don't know Frank, you may know the companies ServiceNow or Snowflake that he led. And this quote really resonated with me is, here is a very driven, high-power, successful CEO, takes companies from 40 million up to many billions of dollars in revenue and does it very quickly. And he goes, I'm done. I'm tired. I need a break. But I'd say this is more of the rare situation where he had found somebody he had cultivated and said, now you take my job, I'm leaving, and he does it on a high. Most people don't do that. So, I mean, from my perspective, I have life insurance policies on me by my investors because they think that I'm that important to keep plugged in at the top level of the company. Maybe I am, but that's a strong disincentive for somebody like me to say, well, let's go and find somebody else to take over. Socially, it's awkward. Hey, I'd like somebody to take my job away. And at every level that I look at it, we don't have those structures in place that make it okay to step back. And yet, we have very high performance to do it. And I'll just ask, before we go on, how many people, how many talks do you have today where the speaker is former CEO as a title? None? Yeah, I mean, that's the essence of what I'm talking about. We got a ton of experience, but all of a sudden, oh, you failed. Oh, you're not in it anymore. It's not okay. So this is what I see here locally in Ontario. And I've been around since the 90s in the Ontario ecosystem. And I looked around in the 2000s and I saw we had OpenText, we had RIM, we had a few hundred startups. And now we have a generation later. I mean, I'm being a little bit disingenuous with this because I think we have moved forward. But really, we have OpenText, we have Shopify, and we have a few hundred startups, maybe 500 startups. Well, why don't we have 20 Shopifys? What's happening along the way that we are putting a ton of effort and energy and capital into these companies, and we're not seeing 20 or 40 of those up there? Why are we still in the same place we were 20 years ago, right here in the Toronto-Waterloo corridor? So I think, I have this idea that if ecosystems would foster talent to take companies at the different stages And I'm not saying that every company has to do this, but for the companies who want to, like I was not the founder as a CEO, and at a certain point I'd like to say, I'm actually really good from the napkin stage right up to $5 million. I'd like to continue doing that. But there isn't a good mechanism for me to do that responsibly within the ecosystem. We don't have, it's very hard to find these people. I'll talk a little bit more about my experiences in looking at that later. All right, so these are the questions, just to summarize, that I'm asking myself. So what if founding teams often get burnt out? What if successful founding teams are naturally talented for startups, but many are simply not suited to the demands and skills of scale-up or the training? And what if it was a success to bring a company to a point and then hand it off to a team that could bring it on its next level, that's trained for that? And then what if there was an ecosystem that fostered these kind of handoffs? I mean, the first couple of points, from my experience, are just true. The last couple are questions to provoke some thinking. So I'm in this situation. This is very real for me right now. Sera4 is 35 people, and I'm facing burnout. I'm asking myself, what do I do in this situation? What's acceptable to me? So we're going to play a little game of democracy, if you'll come along with me. And I'll share my options. There's 4 of them that I see. Maybe you see another one. But I'm going to see what you think somebody in my position should do. Because we're just exiting that startup phase, and we're entering into that ugly, uncertain transition phase. So, I could ignore the problem. Yeah? Personally, I think it's a path of pain for everybody involved. I think it's a pretty common solution, but does anyone think this is a good idea? I could find fresh talent, and here's my big problem, is I find 2 kinds of people. I find, hey, are you interested in the highest, a C-level post at a growing company? We've gone through a lot of the risk stage. Are you interested? And I get 2 types of people. I get the type who stick their hand up and say, pick me. I want to. And those types of people typically don't know what they're about to get into. And I have the other type. They're very well-intentioned, but it's very risky for me. I have another type who have the experience, who I know would be probably better at my job than I would. And they sit on their hands and they look at the corner because they know what's ahead. And they know it's a tough go, and they don't want to be involved. I will say recently, through asking these questions and exploring these things, I have found a third one, which are people who have retired young and have miscalculated how much golf they actually can enjoy in a lifetime, and they are ready to roll up the sleeves. They understand that this is about the journey. It's not about the destination. It's not about the acquisition or the sale. This is about the struggles that we go through and the friendships that we build along the way and the experiences that we have. So this is another option. Well, I could sell the company. I mean, that's what a lot of people do at this stage. In fact, I look at my peer group, half of the people who I sit down as CEOs around the table with, half of them sold their company at about the same size. And, you know, valuations, especially right now, aren't great. It might be an option that might be good for a strategic buyer, but I really question whether this is the right thing for our ecosystem. And if I follow this path, I just perpetuate the fact that we have a couple of big companies, and then we have a handful of startups. And the other thing that I didn't mention on the last slide, of course, was we have satellite offices for foreign companies. And we have a lot of those. Is this what we want? Is this what I want? And the last option, which is potentially the most challenging one, is personal renewal. I came to this understanding when I considered, I'm looking at external candidates that we could invite in and we could add to our leadership team, even wonderful ones who might replace me. Not really feeling the vibe with a lot of them, but I realized if I came at this as an independent candidate for my own job, I would pick me. And I'm not saying that because I'm being egotistical. I'm saying that because my ramp-up time is 0. My skills are actually really applicable. My network is perfectly adapted towards what I do. But I don't do the things I would do if I came in fresh. And that was a really deep understanding for me, to understand why am I not doing the things that I would do if I came into this job now. So there's quite a bit to unpack in there. And yes, this is easier said than done. But those are my 4 options. So just on a show of hands, who thinks I should just ignore the problem? I'm making this all up. It's just let's go for lunch. Anybody? Who thinks I should find some talent to come and add to the team or take over the team? You got the job, Peter. Come on up. Who thinks I should sell the company? Who thinks it's time? This is what Canadian startups do. And by the way, we call this a success. We sell it and we throw a party. Successful exit. Who thinks I should sell the company? Sold. And who thinks I should follow the path of personal renewal? That's wonderful. I actually agree with you. Until I find a better offer, this is what I'm doing. I can't tell you that it's the right choice. Maybe in a few years we'll come back and have another talk and I'll be able to tell you more. But I will leave one slide, something that I saw about 4 or 5 weeks ago, a really grainy photo. And it's kind of squared. Do you know what this is? This is a faraway shot of Elizabeth Holmes going to prison for 11 years. And I only saw one thing in this picture, even though it's so grainy. And she is smiling from ear to ear. I am not here to comment on anything about her case, but I identified with the smile. Because for 10 years, she doesn't have to decide anything. All she has to do is what she's told. And that would be a wonderful relief, which gives a sense of the pressures facing people in my role, people leading these companies, and why these supports that I'm advocating for and I'm asking for the ecosystem to do more for are so important. So, thank you very much.